Welcome to this video, guys, and before you sits this beast here, which is the DC-10 30F, which is one of the DC-10 collection HD liveries included with the Just Flight DC-10 collection HD. Now, I emphasise the HD for a couple of reasons. The first main reason is because they've actually updated the textures. So some of the textures now, well, all of the textures are 2048 by 2048. The second thing is it's been tweaked, modded, updated, however you may wish to describe it, from the original DC-10 collection. The company that created the original one was a company called CLS. And subsequently, they've now worked with Just Flight to upgrade it and update it. So I suppose you could consider it a remastered version. The background really is that CLS obviously did the basic aircraft some years ago now, 2009, 2008, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And one of the reasons I'm doing this review is not just because this was re-released a few months back. It's quite a recent re-release. But also, I think this is one of those things where there's a category of aircraft that are underrepresented when we look at reviews or appearances or appeals in terms of the flight sim community and YouTube in particular. If you were to go out and search for videos about the 737NGX, the Aerosoft Airbus A320, the 777, you know, whatever it may be, even the A2A Cessnas, for example, you will find dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of videos about them. They are incredibly popular add-ons, quite rightly so. They're very high fidelity, very highly detailed. However, there seems to be this area where, if you like, we have a spectrum of flight sim community, all the way from those who've literally just bought FSX Steam equivalent and are on that first step of the voyage of discovery, all the way through to the people who can operate the 737NGX or the 777 in virtual environments of VATSIM with very good, sort of high levels of skill. But we sometimes forget that there is this sort of iterative process, this spread of abilities, experience, and more importantly, desires and wants. And this is one of the things that I'm sort of keen to have a look at with this. This is one of the, I don't know how to pronounce it, the F-Lite, it's capital F dash capital L ITE, almost youth speak for flight. And I think that the underlying principle or the premise of this is to kind of increase the level of where we're at with the default FSX without scaring the living daylights out of somebody. So it still uses a lot of the FSX sort of elements, for want of a better way of putting it, but it does bring it into a more sort of user-friendly environment. There are 19 liveries with this, by the way, and some of them are absolutely gorgeous. Within that, there's a number of different airframes. So you've got the freighter ones here. You've got the DC-10 Series 10, Series 30, Series 40, and you get things like different undercarriage legs there. So all things being fair, they've included quite a wide variety of DC-10s. But that's kind of like the background, if you like, from where this thing came from. And it's also an element for the review for me, is that my gut instinct is, rather than always focusing on the high fidelity, very expensive add-ons, we need to encompass everything the sim involves. Now, the question mark here is obviously this isn't going to be something where we compete or compare with, say, the high fidelity aircraft. The question mark is, what is it trying to deliver, and does it deliver that? Really, that's the basis of the review. Now, the F-Lite series, the basis of it is to have a relatively simple to operate, good quality add-on, which is beyond the normal default. So the person who's got the default flight sim can move on to this and can feel a sense of achievement, a sense of attainment, and enjoy just the basics of flying it. That kind of fits in with a couple of bits now. What is the actual marketplace of this? And I think, sometimes it's easy to forget that there are people out there who won't want to jump straight to a pit. It might not even interest them. But I think there's also two other potential users, one of which is this idea of a turnkey user. If I have a relatively short period of time, and I don't want to sit there with all of my add-ons, PFPX, going through SimBrief, generating load sheets and all this kind of thing. If I don't want to do that, what is nice is still to have a decent aircraft that allows me to basically kick the tyres, light the fires and be airborne within a matter of a couple of minutes. And that's something that this is, if you like, capable of diving into that marketplace for, that turnkey experience. And then, you know, if you like, the final one, there are some aircraft like the DC-10 where there are not that many renditions of it out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look from the outside and see what we think. Now, obviously, we've mentioned the fact that the textures have been updated. The actual external modelling, if you like, for me, comes into, I suppose, three elements. One is the textures, one is the 3D rendering of it, and the other is the, and I suppose with 3D rendering and the textures you come across with the light. And then the other bit is, if you like, the sort of overall aesthetics of it. Now, the overall aesthetics for me is quite good. I do like it as a package to look at. I think it's a very attractive aircraft. But some of the paint schemes, in particular, the liveries are very attractive. Now, you can see in terms of the paint texturing that the light does catch off the surfaces, and you can see here that as I move, you can just faintly see the riveting lines on the top of the texture surface of the wing. You can see as we come up here, we've got texturing around the wear areas at the bottom of the tail fin. Very, very good in terms of how that looks. One of the things I get, well, not frustrated with, one of the things I'm not overly keen on is a factory fresh paint finish. I want an aircraft to look like it's actually done a day's work when I get into it. If you ever get a chance to come up and or go up and see some of these things close to, you'll realise just how filthy they are. But you can see nice weathering along the door for the cargo door here, around the bottom where there's all the scuffs and marks. In terms of lighting and texturing at this range, it all looks good. You'll notice there's an at this range. You can see as we move round by the cockpit, the reflections off the windows as well. Very nice. The overall shape and appearance, colouring, lighting effects, everything is very, very nice. You can see there's different shades of panelling consistent with the aircraft, various vent doors open and so on and so forth. Now, pitot tubes down here, for example, very nice. I think as I go around here, is it? Yeah, here it is. Here's the angle of attack sensor. Now, considering it's HD, there's a couple of things we need to consider here and remark upon, I would suggest. Now, the undercarriage is very nice. I'm not sure if it's deliberate or not, but it looks like the wheels have sunk into the tarmac. Whether that's intentional in terms of making them look like they're compressed, I don't know. Right. Impressive bit. Look at this. This is a really nice rendering of the undercarriage. Really nice build, really nice construction. And from reading about it, there is a special XML element written in for the behaviour of the undercarriage, so that it always sits level on the ground, which is nice. But you can see the brake lines, and it's all in exquisite 3D detail. I mean, the level of detail there is superb. You can see through the various sections that you should be able to see through. You've got all the various pins and joints and articulations there. You've got the brake pipes for the hydraulics and for the sensors. You've got 3D wheel hubs. Look, let me just go down a little bit. In fact, if I zoom out a bit on Easy Dock, it might make it a little bit easier. But you can see it's 3D in terms of the wheel hubs. It all looks grubby. It all looks used. You know, it's really quite nice. The time spent on the undercarriage, even this middle bogie, really nice, really nice. And that's the kind of thing where you can see all the time and effort that's gone in. Superb. Come round by the engines. Lovely chrome effect around on the leading edge of the intakes. For those who are interested, the reason it's chrome, there's a couple of reasons. If you think about the automatic benefits, nice, smooth, shiny chrome surface means that ice won't adhere to it. So there's almost an automatic anti-icing element built in there. Plane doing a go around. We're at Manchester, by the way, and runway 23, I think it is, runway 23 right, and he'll be. Is he landing or going around? I'm not quite sure. I don't think he's sure, is he? I think he's landing. Shows the age of my... is it going to show? BMI baby, look. They went out of business quite a few years ago. That's the that's the age of my traffic pack, shall we say. Really lovely lighting around this cowl, though. If you look at it shining with its shiny, blingy, chromy, blingy, really nice effect. Beautiful. As I say, there's a couple of reasons why you have this sort of chrome on the engine intakes. First one is obviously it's a nice shiny surface, so ice in theory doesn't adhere to it as easily. But the second thing is that it is heated by hot or warm bleed air. Hot bleed air really is the best way of describing it, from the engines. Consequently, that mechanism of anti-icing stroke de-icing means that ultimately your paint would be blistered potentially by the heat. It would suffer a hard time because it's going to be heated up, cooled down, heated up, cooled down, and you know, ultimately it's just the way it is, really. However, back to the case in point. So, in effect, the 3D parts are modelled very nicely. We've had a quick look at the engine. We've had a look at the gear. You can see the hinges and linkages under here for the flaps and the ailerons. The flap tracks down here. You can see this is the high-speed aileron here, and the flaps and whatnot. Upper wing surface with the textures clearly visible. Again, I like the fact it looks weathered, it looks old, it looks as if it's done some work, which it has. Nice lighting off this section of the fuselage here, nice 3D rendering of this bit. However, all is not well. I mean, that texture pack there, that texturing is fantastic. Really fantastic. A lot of the little things are present, so you've got the usual static wicks coming off the 3D wicks. You've got a really nice light down here. I really do like this. This is good attention to detail. This strobe light, navigation light off the tail end of the wing. Look, you can see the glass section to it, and you can see the light filaments behind it. Really nice. Static wicks, again. You can also see the fact that they're affixed to the top edge of the wing. They're not just sticking out the back end of the wing, so there is a 3D element to them. Your ailerons, all very nice. Right. What's at fault here? These are your spoilers. They assist with roll control. So this would be the downgoing wing, so the aileron goes up, and then these spoilers lift up and they destroy lift on the upper surface of the wing. So if you like, this one will fall, whereas the other one will lift, and you get increased roll authority, an increased roll response. These are hydraulically actuated. So when I move the stick with the engines not on, they shouldn't move. However, they do. So there we go. Yeah. For those who are unfamiliar with it, a lot of older aircraft had two sets of ailerons. These are high-speed ailerons. These are low-speed ailerons. Why, might you ask, do we have two sets of ailerons? Well, let's look at these ones first. These ones are very close into the wing, so those who have an understanding of the concept of a lever will realise that having this very close to the wing, you'll notice, A, there's a very small size compared to this, and you'll notice it's very close to the fuselage, as a result of which it has a very small, if you like, torque force that it can apply to the centre line of the aircraft. So you've got the centre line of the aircraft running through it. This has a very small force, if you like, the ability to rotate the fuselage. However, that is far more effective at high speed than it is at low speed. If you imagine these two little paddles, one on either side at low speed, aren't going to be very effective. What you need is something a long way from the lever arm. Ta-da! Here we go. Here's two significantly larger ailerons, quite some distance from the fulcrum of the lever, which is the centre line of the fuselage. So these ones don't have a great deal of force, but these ones do. So, why haven't we just got these ones? Why do we bother with these ones? Well, if you look at the shape of the wing, you've got a nice thick, deep wing section here. So not only is it deep, i.e. front to back, but it's also quite thick. So this section here, look at how thick that section of wing is compared to this, where it's really quite slender. Now there are wing spars. I don't know how many it is in DC-10, but normally it's at least 2 in most aircraft. So you'll have a main spar and either a front spar or rear spar, and some aircraft even have 3. But fundamentally, if you think about the amount of force that's involved in these things, when they start to get to the wing tip, there's a lot of twisting force, because basically what you've got is just two or three very large beams running down. Now if you imagine a pair of chopsticks, clamp both ends in one hand, trying to twist them by pushing the chopsticks right near where your hand is, it's quite hard. If you imagine trying to twist them at the two ends that are furthest from your hand, it's quite easy. You know, if you imagine clamping two chopsticks so that they're parallel with one hand, try and twist them when you're near the hand. It's much harder than if you try and twist them at the end. And so what happened with these is that these would deflect. So let's say we wanted this wing to go up, so we could roll to the left. We would roll to the left. This goes down. Now the problem is that when you look at it from the end, yes, the control surface is going down, but it's also doing the following. It's changing the profile of the wing. And what happened then is it changed the lift profile of the wing. And it moves it back slightly. And what happened is you ended up with a force, an upwards force at the back of the wing. And it would actually twist the whole tip of the wing up. So up at the back, down at the front. And it would cause a thing called control reversal. And basically what you ended up with was exactly the effect you didn't want as a result of it. You'd have excessive strain on the wing itself in terms of the spars, the risk of fatigue and so on and so forth. But what would also happen is you'd have an element of control reversal. Yes, you'd have the normal adverse yaw, but you would also end up with this effect where it twisted the wingtip down. So then the leading edge of the wing would point further down towards the ground, even though that's what you were doing, and as a result of which the lift profile would change and it would not do what you originally wanted it to do. However, obviously at slow speed, these are, well, yeah, these are like throwing chopsticks at a robot. It's just not going to work. This, on the other hand, is like stabbing it in the battery with a taser. Good chance it's going to work. The only difficulty is that doesn't work at slow speed because it's rather ineffective. That doesn't work at high speed because it twists the wing and causes all sorts of problems. So there we go, just an interesting element. So overall, everything's rosy, isn't it? We've got lovely textures. They're rendered in 2048 by 2048. They're all updated. There's lovely liveries. There's lovely lighting effects, lovely shaping and modelling in the 3D environment. All is well. Well, not really. This is one of the nicer textures, but not all the textures have this element. It's not 3D. There's no 3D bit mapping at all. This is one of the crisper textures. Later on what I'll do is I'll get one of the not so crisp textures out. But you can see as we get close up, it's got the limitations here. The text starts to go all blurry, and although it's an interesting element here that if you look at the crispness of what's in the cockpit compared to the crispness of what's here, it's quite surreal in some respects. Lovely light dancing off the windows and the glazing. But that's not really the element here. Look at the crispness of what's in there. And it stays crisp no matter how close in I get, compared to this, which looks lovely out here. But as you get in close, you can see the limitations of the texturing. Likewise, as I say, the doors have got no 3D element. He's going around as well. We must be really upsetting them. But there's no 3D element to the doors and the door seals. Certainly not the cargo doors. In effect, what we've got is the essentials are modelled in 3D. The non-essentials, but nice to see, aren't. And so consequently, there's areas where, things like the windows, there's no relief on the windows. And if you see the passenger variants are just grey panels. It doesn't really look windowish. Mind you, having said that, that looks quite good. The windows here look quite reasonable as we go down with the lighting. I love the colouring on the jet exhaust. This kind of burnished metal look is absolutely fantastic. This is a bit of an odd section here. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. It's a bit bizarre, but all is not perfect. So, for example, this just looks out of place. This crystal clear, you've got all of this work around here to have a weathered, textured, detailed look, and then you've just got this crystal clear line of white and grey blocks that just, it's a small thing, but the details seem to have been missed there in some respects. Overall, external visuals very good. There's a couple of inconsistencies, like, oh, hang on, my Easy Dock was canted off at a slight angle there, slightly weird. A couple of inconsistencies. So the rudder, by the way, comes in two halves. There's a top half and a bottom half. The yaw dampers are also prevalent, so the yaw dampers can operate the top half. There's two for the top half, two for the bottom half. You can see we're starting to get graining on the textures, but that is because we are fairly close to. And you can see where the limitations are. So if you look in here, you can see there's no real texturing in the joints. It's just plain single colours, which, you know, I can live with that. I don't know about you guys, but I can live with that. But you can see this looks more like a photograph stroke texture than anything else down here, which is, you know, does it for me. It's all right. However, there's the odd weird thing that's obviously been missed. 3D lump on one side, which is for the control mechanism for the aft end of the rudder, and on the other side, not 3D. 3D flat. 3D flat. Bit of a shame. However, that's the outside. Let's jump into the cockpit and see how we get on. Right, so the flight deck. Now, in terms of assessing a flight deck, I guess there's two real areas to look at. The first thing is the appearance, and the second thing is the functionality. I don't know why that's on, but we'll turn that off for the minute. Now, in terms of the appearance, this cockpit has, if you like, sort of two real elements to it. Some of the textures are photorealistic, which is significant. So if you look up here, look, you know, that's photorealistic. Other textures are, if you like, mandrolic, where they've literally been painted in or coloured in. And a good example of that is down here with the instruments. The instruments, by the way, are shown in 3D, so if you look along the panel you can see there's depth and 3D effect given to a lot of the instruments, particularly the radio panels, because you see those quite prevalently from where the seating position is. However, as I say, there's two sorts of instruments really here. The first thing is best shown by the radio altimeter, which has got a photorealistic face to it, or a texture that's photorealistic. And then there's other instruments, such as the HSI, where it's less photorealistic. I'm not quite sure what the textures are, whether they're sort of just mandrolic drawn textures or whether they're photorealistic, but you can see a significant difference. Likewise, you can see the difference with the VSI and TCAS combined instrument here, which is very you know, that's a very modern instrument these days compared to some of the old steam driven stuff. Now, the instruments themselves, they're all fairly clear, they're very legible. They obviously get harder to read the further away you get, but you know, in realistic terms, you've got to accept that instruments in terms of the size of the cockpit are going to be representative of the size and text, and you can't really escape from the fact that once you get too far away it becomes difficult to read. What I would say is that the actual clarity as you come in quite close remains fairly okay. A little fuzzy on some of the numbers, but you're not going to be flying this close to the panel when you're moving around and doing what you need to do. So actually, you know, it's quite good. On the controls themselves, you've got a good series of sort of, again, photorealistic textures or textures based on real-life photos. You can see here that there's some texturing on the normal controls that you would expect. Looks very nice, very appealing. Likewise, you've got a number of lamps across here, and they've been given that aged look, and it's one of the things I like is an aircraft that looks worn and used. If you haven't got Easy Dock, you wouldn't be able to see things like this, but they've actually gone to the extent of modelling areas that aren't normally in view, just to give it that increased level of depth, so that people who do have Easy Dock and who have easier access to moving around the cockpit get a much better experience. In terms of moving on from the textures, you end up with good reflections and good lighting in terms of the windows. So you can see as I move around here, you can see the sort of grime on the window surface. Lighting in daylight is perfectly fine. If I just pull one of the start switches, you can see that lights up nicely, and you get a good overall effect. And again, likewise, the panelling, the textures up here, the panelling is 3D with this, you know, the switches being proud and it's all very good up there. one of the key things is does it sort of demonstrate the era that you would expect in terms of the cockpit, and I think certainly up front it does. A couple of slight oddities. This wedding cake on the ADF tuning seems a little bit high to me. Whether that's just a constraint of the 3D modelling available to the designers and developers, or whether it's actually I've never seen a wedding cake that high, but you know, you live and learn, I guess. One of the main things, one of the main concessions here is the FMS. It is a simplified FMS. One of the nice things with this is that you can call up a number of 2D panels. There's a little switch here, hidden switch, and down here, if I get rid of the parking brake sign, you can see that we've got a number of 2D panels. Now I'm going to be blatantly honest here, and I can't stand these two. I think they look unrealistic. I don't like the texturing. I don't think actually they're that usable as panels in any case for me. You know, I think when the developers have gone to the whole extent of developing a virtual cockpit, this really, it's I don't like it. I'll be blunt, it's not for me. A couple of other things, the trim indicator, I mean that's nice to call up to see it quickly, but then you can just do that and it gives you the view. This I do like. This is the jetway and door element of it, so you can click and close and open doors without having to try and do Shift E, which is a very awkward key combination to do Shift E2, Shift E3 and so on and so forth. You can call up the map. I don't like this. I do like this. The GPS, now there's no doubt about it that it's useful as a general GPS for FSX and the default sort of P3D stuff. Because it does provide that level of navigation that allows you to do long-range navigation. However, I hate the idea of using it if you have access to an airliner and if you have access to an FMC. Now, one of the key elements here is that this aircraft actually works quite well with the default ATC, because if you combine the FMC with the default ATC, it actually produces quite a reasonable, realistic scenario, in effect, that you program this. Now, the information that goes in is from the default FSX P3D flight planner, so it's not hard to program, it is simplified, and it does make it a little bit easier in terms of its use. But visually, this is the only 2D pop-up that I think is really, really worthwhile. I really do like the FMC, I really don't like the GPS. However, having it available for, you know, just reference for positioning and awareness as to where you are, there's no doubt it's useful to see airspace, etc. But I don't think it adds anything to the idea of flying an airliner, because it's just not there in real life. You've got the checklist, you've got the open ATC window here, so if you want the ATC, and then you've got the fire panel, which is, again, it's one of the 2D panels I don't like, but you know, such is life. So the overall influence of the cockpit and the overall experience of the cockpit is really quite good. You can see there's areas where there's concessions, and this is one of them, where the circuit breaker panel here is 2D. But I think in terms of modelling it, 3D, it would have been quite an exceptional ask of the developers. And again, you can see where there's photo texturing gone on around the cockpit. Now, the photo texturing is significant. I'll go into that for a reason in a bit. However, again, nice appearance with the flight engineers panel here, and you know, you can mess around with a lot of the stuff here, and it all works with the carrot salad. Now, the next thing, I guess, is functionality. There's a lot of areas of this aircraft where it's been simplified in terms of functionality. The first one, which is fundamental, is the up-front control panel here, the MCP, mode control panel. It uses the default FSX autopilot system, and you can tell that because when you engage the autopilot, there is a bug in FSX where occasionally, in certain circumstances, it will roll briefly to the right before it then comes around to a heading or course that's on the left, which indicates to me that it's using the default FSX autopilot system. Not really a surprise in an aircraft of this nature. The FSX autopilot system is entirely usable. It's not really a massive thing. However, what they do have is they have sort of airlinerified it, if you like, so in terms of the switches and so on and so forth. It's fairly straightforward to operate. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you're used to it, it's actually very good. It's got all the usual modes you would expect. It's got a couple of extra ones though. It's got an N1 mode, so you can have it with an N1 setting, which is the first stage compressor of the engine, the N1 stage. You've also got a thrust control panel here, although only 2 of the modes are active, although it'll let you go over all 6 buttons. But I think it's takeoff and takeoff go around, and takeoff generally and takeoff go around. So yeah, it does work of a fashion, but I don't really use it at all. So the general effect of the cabin in terms of appearance is very good. Functionality is a different issue. The whole point of this as a marketed product is that it's supposed to be accessible and easy to operate. Hence, a comprehensive number of these switches and dials do not work. However, if you're into the stages of setting manual or automatic elevator feel, flap override limits, etc., then you're probably not looking at this aircraft anyway. Slewing compasses and whatnot. You don't need to align the nav systems. The obvious reason for that is that at the end of the day it's a simplified FMC, and it would kind of defeat the purpose of having the simplified FMC. There's a few other concessions. So your dampers, for example, you only need to click on one switch and it activates all 4, and there's a few bits where anti-skid, for example, I'm 110% sure it's not modelled in terms of the modelling of the aircraft. You're not going to skid this thing off the runway, I wouldn't have thought. But this is one of the kind of things where you've got switches that aren't modelled, switches that are modelled but actually are going to have limited effect on the aircraft, and switches where they're modelled and they have the effect on the aircraft you would expect. So a lot of the lights, for example, I don't think the formation lights work to the best of my knowledge, but all the other lights do work. The beacon light, there we go. It needs to be on master or both to be working, but generally speaking, most of the other switches, you can see they do affect the carrot salad, the caution and warning panel. These 2 radios here, don't worry about these. These are HF radios. HF communication is not simulated in FSX, so there's no point having these. Likewise, VATSIM isn't limited by curvature of the Earth for its radio communication, so if you were on something like VATSIM, for example, you can use VHF anyway. It's not an issue because the radio communications aren't real world. However, you can see duplicated for long distance flights where you're out of communication by direct line of sight. You need 2 boxes for that. So nice to see the visual appearance of it, but it's not an issue that it's not functioning. No problem there at all. Most of this, well, all of that functions of a fashion. This we've discussed already. The lights we'll go into in a second. What we'll do is we'll just turn the batteries on. So let's just turn the avionics on. And you can see these light up with a very nice effect. They are duplicated in the FMC, so you can set your radios either by the FMC RadNav page here, or you can set it by the actual dials here, and you'll see here, if you look here, you can see it changing. However, when you come over to this panel, it's described in the manual as automatic, or described in the literature, I should say, as automatic. Let's phrase that another way. There's a limited number of switches you need to function or to operate this aircraft. Key ones, for example, are when you're starting it, the APU master, the APU switches and the generator bus switches, for example. However, a lot of them are there for, if you like, the experience, but you won't break the aircraft if you don't operate them. So the air conditioning packs, for example, do work of a fashion in terms of showing the lights, but if you don't have them set, you're not going to suffer from hypoxia, etc. So the element here, I think, is what they're trying to do, and what I think they successfully do is to give you the experience of a large airliner, which is last generation and needed flight engineers. Now, that really is most of the cockpit. I think overall for me it's a very nice, pleasant experience in terms of a place to be. One of my big issues sometimes is gaudiness of cockpits. By that I mean lurid colours being used inappropriately in cockpits. And this, when you get into the real things, they tend to be quite muted. They're dirty, grubby places. They have a lot of hours in the air of this era. And they're not tidy, they're not pristine. When you get into them, you see that everything's threadbare and all sorts of an aircraft of this era. So I don't like it when there's lurid colours, excessively lurid colours, and this hasn't got any, thankfully. So I do appreciate that, and I think it's marvellous that they've done so. However, what we're going to do now is we're just going to mention a little thing. Normally, well, there's a good and a bad here. The good is that I get good frames per second. So if I get 25 to 28 frames per second on the Aerosoft Airbus A300 series, so 318, 319, etc., I get 25 to 28 because that aircraft is a frame hog. Likewise, the Just Flight Tornado is a frame hog. Now, both of them can be managed by using your computer settings, and I'm a big exponent to the fact that really these days with the add-ons, very few people can max everything out. So there's always going to be a compromise in terms of your aircraft settings, your sim settings, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's just one of those things that we probably shouldn't have to accept, but we do. You know, I think it's just the reality that the spread and breadth of computers that this thing could potentially work on is vast. However, one of the things I've noticed is that my frames per second with this generally average 40, between 40 and 50 of a normal day. This is not an FPS frame hog. I think what that means is the advantage is that most people with normal computers can run it at a decent level. However, the flip side to that is if I call this up, this program is Process Explorer. It's a free program. Now, VAS, Virtual Address Space or Virtual Address Size. It's not strictly speaking memory, but it does have a limit of 4 gigabytes. At which point, if you get to 4 gigabytes, the program crashes with an out of memory error. Because of the number of photo textures, I'm led to believe that's the issue in terms of VAS usage is texturing. Because what happens is that FSX, and for that matter P3D up to version 2.5, what they do is they load the textures, but it's very poor at dumping the textures when it no longer needs them. That's why I've put the clouds in. That's why we're at an airport that's got texturing to it, which is Birmingham in this case, and that's also why we're having a good look around the cockpit. Because if you look at this, I worked it out the other day. The virtual address space used by the aircraft was 900 meg. So with that in mind, the PMDG 737 uses 714 to 740, something like that. This uses more virtual address space than one of the complex PMDG aircraft. However, what Just Flight have done is they've, in Service Pack 2, which this is, they've changed and updated the texturing so that it's less likely to suffer from problems with out of memory. Now, unless you fly over pretty much every airfield you own and have pretty much specialist textures for every aircraft, every airfield you own, and you're running ridiculous amounts of clouds, and you've got photorealistic scenery, and you know you're really pushing your system, out of memory errors is less of an issue than it used to be. What I would say is that there's a guy called Costas who has a website, KOSTAS, very, very useful. It's worth having a read through his stuff in terms of virtual address space. But for Service Pack 2 they have amended the management of virtual address space, so it's less of an issue. But you can see that we're using sort of 85% of our VAS just literally sat here on the ground looking around. So it's something to be mindful of. As I say, however, Service Pack 2 seems to have addressed that much better. What they've done is they've changed some of the texturing, which is impressive with the fact that they've upgraded a lot of the texturing to HD, and also they've improved some of the texture management to manage VAS. So overall impressions of the cockpit are really good. I think really the environment is a very nice one, and actually it's very nice to operate and to work in. However, the scary panel isn't actually that scary, which will be nice for the environment and if you like the enthusiasm towards operating a big jet without breaking it and without sitting there with sort of crumpled metal on the floor all the time. So yeah, inside for me, very nice. Two useful tools as well. One is the FMC and one is the little panel down here, which I think is actually very useful. I do wish more would have a little click spot activated in some aircraft for it, because it does help with access to it. So yeah, cockpit is quite a nice environment for me. Right, so what I've decided to do for the airborne bit, guys, is I've decided that I was going to load the aircraft in the state it loads in the tutorial. I was going to position myself to Manchester, just purely out of the fact that I think it's a slightly prettier airfield than I think it's Penang, the tutorial starts at, which is basic default FSX scenery, so there's nothing particularly exciting there. But this is the state it loads in, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the aircraft started and then we'll take it from there. So as you can see, the battery power's on. We'll just go over here, and what we'll do is whilst we're sorting ourselves out, we'll start the APU, so put the fuel pump on and put it to start, and you can see the N1 of the APU starts to wind up here. And pretty much that's that to start with. What we can do whilst that's doing it, we can put the nav lights on. We don't need the beacon on because it starts with the beacon on automatically for some reason. Just work our way down here. The yaw dampers can go on, don't need that. The anti-skids on, don't need any of the panel lights. These bits here, obviously they don't work, so we will put the GPWS on. We don't need any of those lights yet. We don't need any of that. Start circuit A, engine start switch is currently off, all of that's fine. We'll make sure the no smoking and seat belts are fine, none of the turn off lights needed, that's all fine, they don't work. De-ice can be on for the minute. We will pop the avionics on as soon as we've got APU power. Lighting panel's all done, that's all done, that's all done. Nothing needed there at the minute. In terms of this, what we can do is we can set ourselves up to start with, so I'll do it from here, slightly easier to do. This switch here, HSI, means whether the HSI, this one here, is taking its information from the radio navigation suite or the INS. We'll leave it on INS at the moment because what we're going to do is we're going to click the GPS to make sure the INS is on here. We are also going to set our speed to, one of the things we can do here, let's just call up the FMC. The FMC comes up with this page, status, blah de blah de blah. What we can do, go back to the menu and you'll see the initialization page here, so we can align the IRS. For some reason it comes up with 0 automatically, so we'll clear that. Back to the menu, don't need any of the rest of it at the moment. What I have done actually is I've put in a basic flight plan from Manchester to, let's see, which way? Edinburgh, here. So all I've done is I've just gone into the default FSX flight planner and chucked that in. So you can see the legs are there. That's no huge drama, to be fair. One of the things it does do is it only does the legs time between each leg, so it doesn't do cumulative. Likewise, it doesn't do cumulative on the distances. Look, so never mind, not a problem. So that's our flight plan. Takeoff and approach. One of the things we can do is if we just click the button up there, it comes up with our speeds automatically. V2 is 154. This is quite a heavy bird, so we'll use V2 plus 10 for our climb out, which is 164. So that's set on there. Initial altitude will go to 6,000 feet. There we go. Let's just get rid of the FMC again, don't need that now. So all of that is set. Heading 054 for our initial heading, we'll climb out on that. 054. And that says all good to go. Flick the flight directors on and we're all ready for a start. Parking brake is on. Power levers are back at idle. So let's go and start our engines. Let's make sure all of this is on. Now we can put the APU master to run. APU generator can go on. Generator buzzes can go on as well. What we will do is we'll pop the galley on whilst we're up here. So let me have a think. Fuel pumps need to go on. All of these down here, you can see we've got about half fuel at the minute, which is fine for what we're intent on doing. And as I say, all the rest of it is pretty much automatic. We don't need to get too carried away with those. So what we can do now, start circuit A. We'll start. Let's start 3 first. Now we'll just watch it spool up. And hopefully all goes well, you'll see it surge. Now the only thing that I'm not sure about with the engine start is the N2 here. You'll see it goes absolutely roaring around the gauge, look, when it starts, and then it settles down below the red line. So such is life, and then the engines stabilise. So what we can do now is we can go to engine start 2. You see the N2 starts to rise. We have got fuel flow waiting for the EGT and N1 to go. And you'll see this exactly the same again. N2 just goes roaring off the scale. Don't know why, but it does. Start circuit's finished, so let's just pull number 1. We'll start that going as well. Gets up to 20% and then it goes. There we go. So that's 3 exciting, if good, starts. So up here, one of the things we now do is we can turn the anti-icing on. Look, park brakes on, which is the only warning light left. Actually, should have turned the beacon on. That's very remiss of me. So all of that is set. The only things we need to do now are make sure the generators go on, which they have done there, and the hydraulics go on as well. And we're all good to go. And now what we can do is turn off the APU generators and the APU fuel pump, and we're all good to go. Carrot salad's blank there. Single warning here should be the park brake, which it is there. So yeah, ready to go. So first things first, before we go, just going to dial up a couple of things. Going to dial up Manchester's ILS for 05 left hand, which is 109.5. Chuck the flight directors on the course for the runway 054. It's just in case for whatever reason we were to have an emergency and need to return. We can chuck that there. Just double check, make sure this is on 2,000 feet a minute rate of climb. These are all things that you can do nice and tidily before you go airborne. So GPS is selected for driving nav 1. All of that's good to go. Flaps. I like the flaps here, I really love this. The W markers are what you select, so select 2 stages of flap goes to 15 degrees. You get a disagree light because the flaps and slats aren't moving, and then eventually what happens is they come to within the takeoff range for the slats and it stops at 15. So if I want to change my flap setting, I can change it again and again, and eventually I'll get a disagree light as it's either neither takeoff nor landing. So we're passing through that phase and then we get to landing. So really, really natty instrument. I really do like that. Really do like that a lot. So back over here, we've got our flaps set. We do need our trims set, so let's just put our trims into the green. This is a very nose heavy aircraft if you don't set it all ready for takeoff, so we'll pop the lights on, pop the strobes on. Misclick by me there. And we're all good, ready to go. Just make sure that that panel's fine, and it is. On the toe brakes, select about 60% power, make sure the engine's stabilised, which they do. Brakes off, full power, and I absolutely adore the engine noises with this thing. As you look at our V speeds here, they're quite high compared to an average jet. This is a big, wide body long haul jet, carries a lot of weight with it, and as a result the speeds tend to be quite high. So V1, rotate, bring the nose up 15 degrees. What we will however do there, we'll just stabilise it with a trim, let it climb a little bit. What we'll do at this point, we'll come over here, we'll plug the speed in, indicated airspeed, we'll bring the heading in, altitude, turn those on, and just check our enunciators, speed, heading, VOR, altitude, hold with autopilot 1 on. The reason I've not raised the gear is because I want to watch the gear animations. So let's bring ourselves around here and let's have a look at this work of art and see what happens here. So gear coming up, midline doors come down. Beautiful smooth animation. You can see the nose is animating as well. You can hear the engines winding down as we have reduced drag. Beautiful. Gears away, which is very nice. What we are going to do is we're going to increase our speed now so we can go through our flap retraction process as well. I'll let it get to about 180 and then we'll go and have a look outside again. So outside we go. And then we can see flaps and slats there. There you can see them all moving in nice and smoothly there. Engines are wound down a bit, so I'd assume we're close to 210 knots. One of the things that's nice actually to see here, it's part of the, should we say, developments, is this dynamic wing flex here. Look at this. Absolutely gorgeous. Really is a nice effect how they've modelled that. I mean, I must admit, personally, I'm not a fan of wing flex. Wing flex doesn't really make the experience, it's the actual flight that makes the experience. But for a lot of people, the visual aesthetics are quite important, and this is one of those elements where the flight aesthetics are actually really quite nice. That's a beautiful effect there. And the whole package, it looks good airborne. The reason we're on JAL, by the way, is purely because of the fact that I set it up with a tutorial flight, so hence why we've got that. Now what we can do, we're nearly at 210. Choose VOR, lock. It will wave to the, go around to the left, and it will start to follow our FMS flight plan. And we're just coming up to 6,000 as well. Beautiful timing there. Fantastic. Work of art. You couldn't have planned that any better. Well, I think it was more an element, a good fortune element of luck on my part really there, but there we go. So as we come round, really what we're going to do is we're going to get onto a heading of about, we'll let it level out, sort itself out as if it's doing its FMS business. Should come round onto an intercept heading suitable for our course and track to get to the next waypoint. You can see Manchester over there. It's quite a sprightly performer, to be fair, so what we are now going to do is we're going to bring the heading round to what we want. Both of them work, by the way, the MCP and also the heading down here. So we'll come round to about 235 maybe, 234, which is the reciprocal of the runway heading. And now what we can do is we can just click heading and it'll go round to the left again. Beautiful, look at that. Lovely. Once we're around the corner, we'll do a bit of general handling. We'll just see how the thing handles, and then we'll go in for an ILS to land. Now, in terms of handling, this is not a high fidelity flight model. As I said previously, and as the sort of, should we say, the marketing directs for this, this is supposed to be a fairly straightforward aircraft to operate, with some complexity added in over, if you like, the normal sort of run-of-the-mill aircraft. So in that regards, there are a few things that you will need to learn in terms of operating the aircraft, which is quite good. So you've got this switch here. We'll just turn that over to the INS nav, which means that we're going to use this as our reference. Take that off, so we're not using the GPS for our reference either. What we can then do is use VOR localizer and or ILS straight away. So we're into our instrument navigation mode instead of our GPS INS mode. Airfields over here. Scenery, by the way, UK FTX England with UK 2000 airport. Very nice it is too. And that's it, guys. That's us ready for our cruise. We could obviously do a climb. We're not going to bother. And then obviously here you've got your various abilities still to mess around with your FMS. So if we go into flight plan, then obviously you get your flight plan as you put it in, really. Heading from EGCC to Pole Hill. Well, we're not now because we've diverted. We're not going to go there at all. So with that in mind, let's go back to menu. We don't need anything else here at the moment. We'll pop it on RadNav so we've got the figures if we need them, but we don't really need them. Likewise, if we wanted, we could get the data for the weather. You can see it's just an ICAO standard day at the minute. A little bit chilly, not too bad, but yeah, it's all very good. We haven't programmed anything in there, obviously, so what we can do now is we can just go to the takeoff approach page. We don't need the takeoff speeds anymore. We'll go to the approach, calculate those, and for our weight, these are the figures we need. So slat extension rate, speed 211. Gear limiting 178, flap extension limit is 188, and then down here you've got your max limits for the various stages of flaps. So all is good. What we're going to do is we go in a sort of ham-fisted downwind sort of route, what we're going to do is disconnect the autopilot and we'll have a quick look at the general handling of the thing. So first off we want to get rid of that, and we want to get rid of that, and all the warning signs come off. Let's readjust my throttles to where FSX thinks they are. Okay, so roll. This is a big heavy aircraft, and whilst I don't expect the flight dynamics to be you know, 100% accurate to real world, I do expect them to demonstrate the, you know, what I expect the handling of a heavy, large, very heavy jet to be. So we've got the control column visible down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put full left-hand yoke in, and you can watch the sort of movement here, and then correlate it to the movement in terms of roll. So 3, 2, 1, full stick, and you can see it's not a particularly fast roll rate. It reverses nicely. It's crisp though. So what we'll do is we'll go full right, get to about 45 degrees angle of bank, and then I can do that. A little quick counter to stop it from going too far. So 45 degrees to the left, stabilise it, and a quick check, and it's very crisp handling. It's slow, it's quite benign, but it is very crisp handling, so we'll give it that. In terms of climb, pitch stability, one of the things I noticed the other day is it doesn't really demonstrate much in terms of pitch stability changes. So as I lift the nose, what should happen is the speed should decay, the nose should drop, but it kind of just stays there. So I suppose if I'm being nice to it, I'd say it demonstrates neutral pitch stability. It just sort of sits there and does nothing. So it doesn't deviate, but it doesn't come back to where you'd want it to come back to either. Likewise, if I do the roll, let's just level ourselves off a little bit. You can see I can roll into it. It's got very slight positive stability. As the nose drops, you can see that the dihedral and the swept wing profile is having a very small effect in terms of stability, in terms of the roll. Now, one of the elements that's worth being aware of here is the yaw damper in this gives limited rudder authority. So what do I mean by that? Well, here's full left rudder with the yaw damper on. It is doing something. You can see with this turn and slip indicator, the slip ball is showing that yes, you know, you're out of balance, but it's hardly going to throw you out of the sky. So let's get that back. This is all hands off, by the way. I haven't got my hands on the stick at all. It's and then with the yaw damper off, you can see the difference in terms of yaw, and you can get quite a lick on. So really, with that in mind, let's just see if there's any cross-coupling of controls in terms of secondary effects. So roll, does the nose yaw to the right? Not particularly. Does it yaw to the left? Not particularly. So there's not much in the way of secondary effects of controls there, even without the yaw damper. With full left boot, it should roll to the left as well, and it does eventually. Just gives a chance as well to assess yaw stability. Yaw damper out. Yeah, it's got decent positive stability there. Yaw damper on. I wouldn't expect it to have any instability at all. Yeah, good positive stability there as well. So really the question mark now is, does it behave as I would expect a very heavy jet airliner to behave? Well, yes and no. It's not a yeah, it is. I suppose it's a simplified flight model. It's designed not to scare the living daylights out of people, which I guess is a good thing, because at the end of the day, that's what this is designed for. This is not designed for somebody who's going to throw this around the sky in god-awful weather, desperately hoping to pin this thing on the ground. It's designed simply to go out there and have fun. And in terms of the handling, certainly for me, I think it does that. The kind of thing that we can see, which is quite correct actually in terms of behaviour, we're low enough in the speed. Let's just level ourselves off. So it's probably about +2, +3 degrees pitch. Yeah, somewhere about there. First stage of flaps, I'd expect the VSI to jump as we balloon. And it does. Not a great deal of change in speed, which is fine. You can see the nose attitude is changing due to the change of centre of lift. So we'll bring that back under control. And as the speed decays, what I'll do is I'll put us to full flap and we'll see what happens. I'm going to be quite abusive towards the aircraft, really. So speed's decaying. Now I'm expecting quite a lot of drag. We do get a balloon, not really a surprise. But you can see the speed starting to drop quickly, so let's stop ourselves from stalling, and we'll set up for an approach now. Okay, so we've passed through the centre line of the runway, so we'll just come around to the right whilst we descend. We're just passing through the glide slope as well. Quite a quick rate of descent here. We'll set ourselves up for a hand-flown ILS, see how we get on. I haven't flown that many ILSs in this one before, so at the end of the day, if it presents itself well with hand-flown ILSs, it's always a good aircraft. It's one of the things for me that demonstrates a good aircraft, is how it presents itself in a hand-flown ILS. You know, it's quite straightforward to do an automatic ILS. It's quite straightforward to do that. So we're looking for a platform altitude of about 3,000 feet. We're a long way away, so we can come back round to the right as we descend. Come round just shy of a rate 1 turn, which would be about 30 degrees in this thing. As we come through, we're going through the centre line. It's alright, we'll intercept it from the left hand side. Not a problem. Let's bring it all the way around, and then we'll do a hand-flown ILS and see how we get on. What I am going to have to do is I'm probably going to have to just edit the video here because you don't want to follow me in for 24 miles in towards Manchester. So I will see you guys in a moment. Okay, so join me. We're intercepting the localizer from the right for 05 left hand into Manchester, trying to maintain our 3,000 feet platform altitude at the minute. Maybe not turn in quite so tight. And one of the things they always recommend is that the sign of a good aircraft is if you can do a hand-flown ILS fairly accurately in it. So we can see the glide slopes coming in now, so we'll just take a bit of the power off. Settle ourselves down to 053, something like that. The wind's slightly from the left, so we'll just ease left. Next stage of flaps, gears coming down. And here we go, we're starting to settle into a nice rate of descent. Slightly early, if anything. We're looking for about 800 feet per minute. Get a bit of power on. What we don't want to do is start climbing, however. So let's get the nose down, let the speed build up. Still going high. Let's get the nose down a little bit more. Making sure to use the trimmer, try and keep the aircraft nicely trimmed. So at about 160 knots we would need 800 feet a minute rate of descent to maintain our 3-degree glide slope. So at 1,000 feet a minute we should be coming back in nicely, and you can see the glide slope deviation is settling down nicely. And it's slowly coming in. We're still on centre line. 160 knots is where we want to be. We've got 35 degrees flap deployed at the moment. We might go to 50, we might just stop at 35. Glide slope's recovering very slowly, just go from 900 to 1,000. Get that glide slope back in again. 5 knots faster than I wanted to be at 160. Still on centre line. Glide slope still high, even though we've got 1,000 feet a minute rate of descent. So we're just going to notch that up to about 1,100, 1,200 feet a minute, get ourselves back on glide slope. Just drifting slightly left of centre line according to the instruments. Slightly fast at 170, take the power off. Glide slope's coming back into where we wanted it. Still slightly left of track according to the HSI. Speed's coming back nicely. Glide slope's back where we wanted it to be. Let's just arrest that descent. About 1,900 feet a minute rate of descent again is what we're after really. So we've got 3 reds looking at that and a white, so we're slightly low. no idea what the wind is, but I think it's slightly from the left with the way it's blowing us. We're just going a little bit high again. In fact, a little bit low, sorry, my mistake. Just watching the speed. Tickle the throttles a little bit, we're going quite a bit low actually now. If it's more than half scale deviation, you'd fail your instrument rating test, so it's important to try and keep it within that half scale. I don't know what's going on with those pappies there. Don't know what's going on at all. Okay, visual the runway, so we're coming into land. Hopefully we'll get some sort of reasonable landing out of this.
100.
100.
50. 30.
Now one of the things being a big aircraft, it's very high on its undercarriage. And let's bring it down to a decent speed. Okay. Impressions of all of that then. Beautiful to hand fly. It's very stable for a big aircraft, you would expect that, but from the perspective of someone who's new to flying big jets, this is really nice. It's got no real elements that are going to bite you. The only thing that's going to bite you is, well, there's two things really. The first thing is how high off the ground it is. You have to flare it that little bit earlier than maybe some of the smaller aircraft. And the other thing that's potentially going to bite you is the very high approach and takeoff speeds, which are accurate. I mean, these things, I read an article the other day on the fact that the MD-11 apparently was quite a difficult aircraft to fly in its time. So I've got no doubt the DC-10 was as well. But one of the elements with this is it's a very heavy, almost ponderous aircraft in some respects. So let's get to the meat of this. Would I recommend it? Yeah, quite simply. There's a couple of things that I think could be done better. There's a couple of things I think that I would rather they were either done a different way or done slightly better or whatever. The first one being the lights in the cockpit, really. The second one, I suppose, comes down to just personal preferences, and that would be maybe a little bit more functionality with some of the panels. However, you've got to be mindful of the market this is aimed at and what this is intended at. I would normally fly some fairly high fidelity aircraft. I mean, my favourite is the Jetstream 4100 from PMDG from some years back. Sadly, it doesn't work in prepared, and I do miss it, so now I tend to fly around in the Dash 8 Q400 amongst other things in my FSX stroke P3D world. However, what I would say is that for the DC-10, it's a very good model. It's very nicely modelled visually. I've got absolutely no qualms, but with the exception of some of the exterior textures when you zoom in get a little bit fuzzy. However, I think that's to be expected. There's a few little areas where the texturing doesn't quite line up or match up on some of the liveries. Generally speaking, however, you can see there it's very good. It's got nice effects on it, nice lighting, nice weathering. Looks like a DC-10, behaves like a DC-10. The flight model is really nice. I'm assured from the Just Flight information that's available that the numbers match. I can't help but think that the modelling is slightly simplified by the elements in terms of just the handling characteristics, in terms of adverse yaw and such similar things. And obviously there's a few areas where like the yaw dampers, for example, where it's kind of like a half and half. It's acting as a damper, but it's also losing authority. I mean, yaw dampers only work up to about 5% authority of the total authority of the rudder. So in theory, a yaw damper shouldn't restrict the pilot's ability to use the full extent of the rudder. However, in this case, unfortunately, it does. But these are all little things. I mean, as an overall product, the next thing you have to look at is you have to look at a combination of the product as a whole in the marketplace and the price. Now this thing is with Just Flight at the moment at £25, and there's a lot of aircraft around there within the £25 to £35 bracket. And even on Just Flight's webpage, you know, at this price, there's only maybe 8 or 9 sort of similar products in and around that price, and a few of them are a little bit more, a few of them a little bit less. So, is it a good package? It is for the market that it's targeted at. Having said that, do I enjoy flying it? Actually, I do. I didn't expect to like it. I didn't expect to enjoy it as an aircraft. I didn't expect to enjoy it as an add-on because of things like the simplified FMS. However, the handling's nice. It's very nice to fly. It's got quite an atmospheric cockpit to it, and I do enjoy it. I can't explain why. And I think, if anything, that should be one of the indicators for this package. As I say, I do enjoy it. I think it's a very nice package, very atmospheric. As I say, it's kind of a get in and go aircraft. Kick the tyres, light the fires. It's not going to take long to get it started. You can fly long haul routes. So with that in mind, folks, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I shall speak to you all soon. Take care.